So we're going to jump back into Rodric Williams' evidence to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, and in this he's answering Nick Wallis's final couple of questions, including if Nick Wallis says, is there any data to back up that subpostmasters love using Horizon? And Rodric Williams' response to that was that it was a puerile request, a puerile question from Nick Wallis. If you do have a couple of quid to spare and you want to support our work, please see the Patreon and locals links in the profile and description. Thank you very much for your support. Let's jump into the inquiry.
Let's move on. We can skip the next paragraph where you draw an analogy. We go back to some text that Mr. Wallis wrote. So his question was, is your statement about the vast majority of sub-postmasters, and the point there, the statement he is referring to is a statement that the Post Office put out in an earlier reply. Is your statement about the vast majority of sub-postmasters not having any problems with Horizon based on customer feedback or purely on the volume of successful transactions? And then we see your comments. Our customers don't use Horizon. If by customers Nick Wallis means agents or Horizon users, we could point to the churn rate of agents, i.e. if agents aren't happy with Horizon, they can leave the network. That's the same point that you made above.
Well, yes and no. Of course they could, but it's not like there is a rival operator they can go to if they want to operate a post office. It's, a single entity, a monopoly, if you like. So they didn't really have that option other than shutting down the businesses.
I think this would only show general churn, i.e. it wouldn't distinguish those that left because of Horizon as opposed to any other reason, e.g. retirement. Still, if the network is fairly stable, a low churn would suggest it's only a minority of agents that are unhappy with the system, which is consistent with what we've seen through the scheme.
Or they've invested a lot of money, in some cases the savings, into a business, and there is no other operator they can go and work for to deliver that business. Natural monopolies deliver low churn rates because if that's what you are trained and want to do, and there is only one monopoly provider of it, they are your only option.
I get the sense from speaking to a number of sub-postmasters that they don't like the system, they don't trust it, and they live in fear of what the Post Office might do if they get something wrong with it. This is Mr. Wallis speaking. It may be because I only come into contact with sub-postmasters who are having problems that I keep hearing this. So it would be useful to know the other side of the coin. You say, same points as above. On the they live in fear point, it is wrong for an agent to deliberately cover up branch losses and falsify the figures the agent enters into the system.
So would that be a direction to say, actually, that the ones who are living in fear are the ones who he has spoken to have actually, it's like an allegation that they've deliberately tried to cover up branch losses and falsify the figures. It's quite a broad brush statement now that we know the Horizon bugs, errors and defects that some people, even who were successfully prosecuted, were actually facing at the time, and that some of these losses generated by Horizon were illusory, as Jason Beer has put it before.
So in these paragraphs, in your response to your colleagues, you're making the same point, aren't you? That the measure of Horizon's reliability or success can be seen through the number of sub-postmasters that are leaving the business.
I think it's rather the other way. It could be seen by those who are staying within the business.
I.e. it must be a good system, because otherwise more would leave.
Or at least an acceptable system.
I mean, it's easy for him to think that as a lawyer, isn't it? Because if he was dissatisfied with his role at the post office, which you'd think he isn't, having been there for 12 years and certainly receiving one promotion at least, it's easy for him to go and work as a lawyer somewhere else because there's not a monopoly. But if in his role every lawyer was employed by one company and he was a trained lawyer and that's what he wanted to do, then it's easier said than done to say I'll walk away from that, because basically you're saying I'm going to have to retrain and set up again. And on top of that, these sub-postmasters have invested their own cash to get the franchise of the post office in the first place. So it's a lot to turn your back on rather than try to seek help with the system that isn't working.
Was that your best evidence base when you were writing this 2 years in to your 2.5 years into your role for the reliability of Horizon, the number of sub-postmasters that were leaving the post office?
No, I'm looking for. I was looking for things that could contribute to the discussion. What was, and maybe this is getting to, well, it's not quite a strategy. I'm sorry. There was, my recollection is that there is a feeling that the complaints being raised about Horizon were being raised by a small number, a small proportion of the network, and that it was being used successfully by the vast majority of the network every day, aggregating up to, and I think I can still remember, hopefully, the numbers, 6 million transactions a year, 6 million transactions a week, 2 billion a year across the 11,500 plus or minus branches. And we were seeing a very small number of complaints.
And he's asking for the data, isn't he?
I mean, is that actually factually true? Because when we've heard about the complaints and issues raised with the helpline in the cases that the post office brought, individuals were making, seemingly in many cases, tens of calls a month, if not more. So that surely doesn't indicate a system working well.
In this last paragraph, if you have any data which shows the vast majority of sub-postmasters love using Horizon and trust it implicitly, it would be useful to have that information. So he's asking the very question that you've just referred to. And then let's see what your response is over the page, please. This is Puerile. Why did you think that Mr. Wallis's question, if you've got data that shows that sub-postmasters like using Horizon and trust it, it would be useful to have that information. Why did you think that was puerile? Puerile meaning childish, immature, or petty.
Jason Beer isn't going to let him live down that strategy definition, is he? He's going to define every single word that he uses, even when it's Rodric Williams' own words.
I'd say looking at it today, it doesn't feel puerile, so I think that may.
I'm sorry?
I think that may just be a very poorly worded email.
Which word did you intend to use instead of puerile?
I'm sorry, it's on two screens.
Yeah, we can look at the bottom of the third page and the top of the...
Yeah.
So that's it. Question at the bottom of page 4.
I think I know why I'm saying it now. Sorry, that's why. FMRs love using Horizon and trust it implicitly. It's a very high bar. I don't know too many people who really love their computer systems. I'm sure there are people, but I think that's what the expression is going to. Do we have data that says people love using Horizon?
He's asking, isn't he, for data that backs up a statement that the post office made that the vast majority of sub-postmasters are not having any problems with Horizon.
Well, no, he is there asking for evidence that postmasters love using Horizon and trust it implicitly. And I think I read that as setting an impossibly high standard for us to have evidence, information that would show that. I don't. That's what I think I'm saying there.
You carry on.
Well, to be fair, at this point, there'd be many reasons for a growing number of sub-postmasters, because don't forget the post office admit themselves that prosecutions were going up substantially compared to pre-Horizon, and this is in 2014. They'd certainly have many reasons to hate the computer system, never mind not love it.
The best I can think of is to show that agents aren't voting against Horizon with their feet. That's the third time you've referred to that.
Yes.
Was that the best evidence?
I don't know. Certainly when I wrote it was the best I could think.
Overall, would you agree that without focusing on the individual paragraphs, in this part of Mr. Wallis's request, he's asking for some data, some material that backs up a statement that the post office had made that the vast majority of sub-postmasters are not having any problems with Horizon.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was reading.
In this part of his request, he is asking generally for some evidence, some data, some material that backs up a statement that the post office had made that the vast majority of subpostmasters are not having any problems with Horizon. And overall, the best you can come up with is that they're not leaving the business.
That's the best I can come up with. I think earlier on we saw there was references to the MBSC, call log data, etc. I think that would be better management information than churn rate, which was another strand of management information that may support, I guess, user acceptance, if not happiness.
So that's great then. That's the data you hand over if you're saying that's your better evidence. But are they suggesting that the churn rate is the better evidence because that's all they're willing to provide?